Perfect. Good evening and welcome to the February 3rd, 2022 Parks and Recreation Commission regular video meeting. I am Jody McCarthy, Parks and Recreation Commission Chair. In accordance with Proclamation 20-28.10 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order, tonight's Parks and Recreation Commission meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. City staff and consultant Emily Moon are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones. Will the city staff please call the roll?
Chair McCarthy?
Here.
Vice Chair Struck?
Here.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner Birkenwald? Commissioner Westberg?
Here.
Commissioner Markson?
Here.
Commissioner Burstein?
Present.
Commissioners, before we start the business of tonight's meeting, I want to welcome our new liaison to the City Council, Council Member Craig Reynolds. Council Member Reynolds, would you like to share a bit about your interest in the Parks and Recreation Commission?
Sure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Council, every year we get an opportunity to sign up for what roles we'd like to have. I volunteered for the Parks and Rec Commission because it seems like there's a lot going on I'd like to be a part of. Parks are a huge part of what makes Mercer Island what it is, and I was here to be a part of it and participate in the great work you're doing on the PROS plan and beyond.
Thank you and welcome again. Now, what I want to suggest is some rules to help us run the meeting smoothly. If a commissioner has a question, please use the raise hand feature. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. Everyone will be asked to limit themselves to one question and to one clarifying question if necessary, so that each commissioner has a chance to ask a question before a commissioner is given another chance to ask a question. Additionally, prior to speaking, please state your name for those listening in on the meeting. Tonight's agenda will not include in-person public appearances in accordance with Proclamation 20-28.11 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order. However, individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing application, provided, however, they registered their desire to speak with the city admin staff by 4 p.m. today. City staff, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the commission?
No, Chair, there is not.
All right, so moving on to the first item of business, which is to review and consider approving the minutes from the January 6th, 2022 special meeting. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 6th, 2022 meeting?
I so move.
All right, Commissioner Westberg has moved. Is there a second?
Don Cohen, second.
Okay. We have two people rushing. I love it. Okay. There's a motion by Commissioner Westberg and a second by Commissioner Cohen and by Commissioner Burstein. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones.
Chair McCarthy?
Aye.
Vice Chair Struck?
Sorry, we didn't hear you, Peter.
Aye.
Commissioner Cohen?
Aye.
Commissioner Birkenwald? Commissioner Westberg?
Aye.
Commissioner Markson?
Aye.
Commissioner Burstein?
Aye.
All right, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. The second item of business is the Luther Burbank Docks 30% design, second reading and recommendation. We welcome Paul West, Capital Improvement Project Manager, to talk to us about it.
Thank you very much. Paul West, CIP Project Manager. And glad to be back with you again for the second meeting on this topic. This is the 30% design of the Luther Burbank docks. Last meeting in January, we just introduced the design as a first reading and got questions from the commissioners about the design. And I'm not going to go through those because they're in your agenda packet, but the commentary that I want to give is about the overwater stairs, because we had 3 different comments that involved the overwater stairs, and they were all related to safety in some way. And it made us go back and consider as a design team what we need to do to address that. We believe that in subsequent design in the 60% stage, that we want to engage a professional who is qualified to evaluate the safety issues around this stair feature and have a memo to the record of the project on considerations for that feature. There are consultants who specialize in waterfront recreation, swim beach design, et cetera. And there are topic experts on this that we will seek out if that's an agreement with the Commission's recommendation. Other than that, there is some, there was a comment about whether the overwater stairs could be made more accessible. And as we're going to be having to do some more ADA analysis on the entire project, we will take that up in 60% design also. So that's a less significant response there. But those are 2 responses that we didn't make in the meeting last time that I just wanted to provide for the commissioners today. Other than that, I'm open to answering more questions or moving on. Once we've gone through questions and there seem to be, if there seem to be no other concerns, then we could talk about the handoff memo to City Council. So any other questions or discussion on the 30% design, please feel free to pitch in at this point.
Commissioner Westberg, but just before you start, I just want to acknowledge that Commissioner Birkenwald is now with us in the meeting. Go ahead, Rory.
This is Commissioner Westberg. Thanks, Paul, for the report and for the and for all of this this great design material. And I don't really have a question on the 30% design per se, but what caught my eye, and I just wanted to ask a question about it, is the temporary access and staging plan. And I know that's not really something that would need to be addressed at the 30% level, but probably later on in the planning process. But have any discussions come up about what the impacts of this project would be on other park users and how they would be mitigated? For example, are most materials going to be brought to the site and materials taken from the site via water, or is it going to be a mix, or how is that going to work?
Good question. You're right, that's a later design phase, but we have had some initial discussions about that because we want to minimize the impact of park users. Our in-water work window is going to be July 16th to September 30th of whatever year we construct, which is expected to be 2024. So from July 16th to September 30th, it's almost certain that the plaza will be closed and through traffic will be prohibited. How much other time will be needed to block off that area is less certain. And we've actually, the most recent conversation we had, which was just this week, was trying to do this in 2 phases where we actually do some of the upland work in the fall of 2023 and then do the in-water work in plaza in the second half of the summer of 2024. And that might extend into the fall, but we can at least get some of that spring and early summer waterfront use in between those two phases. So that's one of the ideas that has been discussed.
And just a quick follow-up, if I may, and so to the extent that materials would need to be transported from the parking lot down to the waterfront area work site, you could use the existing gravel trails in the park without having to do any modifications to those trails?
Yes, the trail to the south is a gravel driveway. It is held up very well, and all the loads that we've carried on it. The north trail is not sufficient. It's a steep asphalt path that has two tight curves in it. But likely there will be a staging area off-site because there's not a lot of space down there. So it'll maybe be a part of the meadow or maybe up by the caretaker's house. I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes, Don Cohen. I support the idea of hiring a specialist if that's what staff thinks needs to be done. What I'm struggling to understand, and maybe this is a process question, is we've got two significant issues that are safety related or ADA access issues, and they haven't been addressed, very fully yet for the reasons that Paul described. My rhetorical question is, how can we be recommending to the council that full steam ahead at the 30% level if two significant issues like this are, have only had the surface scratched?
Okay, well, let me break it down, because the ADA issue, I think, has had more than the surface scratch. The landscape architect for this project is an expert on ADA and has applied her knowledge of ADA to this project. So I think we have looked at that already fairly well. I think the reason that we're wanting to have a ADA analysis of the whole project is that there is a lot of moving parts here. So while we're doing that, I think we also want to have somebody who's a subject expert check our analysis for the overwater stairs at the same time. So I'm not sure that the ADA issue rises to the same level as the overwater stairs. The problem with the overwater stairs is that there is no standard for it. There's not a lot of comparable facilities for it. How can you make a recommendation? Is you can make a recommendation subject to this additional analysis that gives you more information at a future date. That's the only way I can imagine doing so. You're not going to be responsible for making a final decision on this at this point.
Well, maybe Don Cohen again. Thanks for that, Paul. And I agree with you. The wheelchair access to the overwater stairs was the ADA issue that I was referring to, and that did say in the staff report that it was going to be analyzed by at the 60% stage by a specialist and all that. But anyway, tell us, please. So the process would be, what happens when we get another 30% along the way? So we're close to 2/3 of the way. What happens then?
At that point, well, so there's a couple moving parts on these overwater stairs. We have the variance that has to happen, and we have this the safety issues to be worked out. I think this is where the in another type of project, a street project or some other kind of transportation project, these safety issues would just be the responsibility of the project manager working with the director to satisfy all the needs of the project. all the goals of the project. So I think, safety is certainly a goal of this project. I don't see why we wouldn't make a decision after 60% design whether the stairs are feasible or not. We'll know about
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
before you finish your sentence. But so who's going to weigh in on those things at the 60% levels? Sorry, my phone is ringing in the background. That the staff and after consultation with the specialist, is the commission, is the council. I guess what I'm having trouble with is sort of delegating issues of that importance without it coming back to some policy making level. I'm not sure which.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is a policy issue. I think it's a design issue. So I think I was not expecting it to come back to a Parks and Recreation Commission or City Council unless there was a budget or a policy issue.
Okay, that leaves me uncomfortable at the moment.
I mean, we do expect to be updating the commission at the various design phases, but I don't know that there's another approval process, because each approval process then Parks and Rec Commission is not the final decision-making body. Its only function is to recommend to City Council. So then it needs to go back to City Council. So that's a fairly unusual thing to have the council involved in design all the way through a design process. At some point, the council hands it off to the expertise of its staff to execute.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to Vice Chair Struck. You're on mute. You're on mute, Peter.
First problem of the new year. Commissioner Cohen did, raise an issue. A couple of thoughts. Clearly, nobody is wanting to design an unsafe overwater stairs and so forth. So I think it's just, but I think he does raise some good points. The question I have is, in the permitting process with the state, feds, whoever, do they get involved with the design and kind of that safety aspect? Does that give us any comfort in addition to retaining a consultant?
Where it'll likely get into safety review is not with the feds or the state. It'll probably be with the local building code official when we apply for construction permits, where when we're building something that is not, that there's no code application, they'll want to see some justification for it.
So to follow up then, Paul, so obviously the local would be the city of Mercer Island. And would they have would the code official have the ability then to say, hey, this isn't my area of expertise, or I'm going to require a safety inspection / design expert to come in and kind of opine on it? Is that within their purview?
I believe so. They do that with other things like geotech. They actually require an applicant to pay for them to hire a peer review geotechnical expert to review any of the applicant's geotech work. So same thing could be in this case with safety, but I don't know what the building code official will require.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Rory, I'm going to skip over you again, and I'm going to go to Commissioner Markson because she hasn't asked a question yet.
Okay, thank you. I just had a quick question about sorry, I see on the drawings that there's something called habitat gravel. And I guess in general, I was looking at the design and trying to figure out what parts are intended for people in the water, and if there are some parts that are intended for habitats. And that's the only thing I could find that mentioned something about fish. And I know you're doing a lot to like kind of protect, that's the point of the walkway that you can see through and all that. But is there other features that are intended for habitat improvement?
We haven't gotten that far in the 60% design phase. We're going to be doing a biological assessment, and there may be habitat improvements that we decide to implement because of the need to create no net loss of habitat function. We just haven't gotten there yet. We're likely, the thing that they're going to probably ask us to do is take out some of the industrial debris that's in the water. If you walk along the Hanson Bollards and look down into the water, you see bricks and concrete rubble and pipes. And there's stuff in the water that's been there for a long time that isn't good for much of anything. And probably that's probably the easiest thing we could do to clean up the lake bottom, especially in that first 30 feet of the nearshore environment.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I was just, just a thought, and it sounds like you in the 6% design will be thinking about this a bit more, but it seems like it could be, if there's a way to, make it a little more part of the project, or at least part that you can point to and say, look, we did this here, and you have an outdoor classroom. So I'm not sure what the classes are intended to be, but it might be a nice feature to have some very specific habitat improvements that people can see, given that we all live on an island, and most people see just docks and don't really know what it takes to improve habitat. So anyway, just a thought.
I should point out that the project is directly to the south of this project, the South Shoreline Trail, which we are going to be constructing in 2022 and 2023, will have some of that. We're going to be putting down habitat gravels along the shoreline there, and we actually plan to have interpretive artwork along that trail to illustrate what the habitat gravel does for juvenile salmon. So there will be some of that, not in this project. Well, it could be in this project, but there definitely will be. If you're walking from the swim beach to the waterfront docks, then you would see this.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, Commissioner Westberg.
Commissioner Westberg, I just wanted to address Don's point about the steps, because the steps are in fact accessible. The gaps between the Hanson bollards will be large enough for someone in a wheelchair to wheel onto that 4-foot top step and to be able to experience the view from the steps in perfect safety. What's at issue is whether or not we should have accessibility down to the very lowest step. And I think that those of us on the subcommittee felt that, given all of the other attention that we paid to ADA needs and ensuring that paths and walkways and beaches would be accessible to all, that we didn't view that last 2 steps as a significant omission. And then secondly, with regard to the safety issue on the steps, we did go kind of round and round about whether or not we needed to put some sort of a barrier down along the bottom of the last step, but concluded that, if you put even if it was somehow a clear barrier or something like that, if you put something like that down there along the edge of that step, between the step and the water, it sort of defeated the purpose of having the steps there in the first place. The whole idea was to create this open environment where you could sit and contemplate the lake or contemplate the activity on the docks or things like that. I do think we need to look at whether or not that would meet safety requirements. We don't want to create a public nuisance or a hazard or anything like that, but it wasn't an issue that we didn't consider. We were just, that those steps are such even the consultant admitted, are such a unique feature to this particular project that nobody really knows what the appropriate way to construct that is.
All right, one last from Dawn, and then we're gonna move on from this. Commissioner Cohen?
Don Cohen, we're going to move on from the Luther Burbank dock thing or
Well,
from this part of it? Because
From this part of it.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
then my only remaining comment on this part of it is I'm a little bit disappointed to hear Paul's comment that they're considering putting signage on the pathway between the swim beach and the area that we've been talking about. The commission and Paul know how I feel about signage and that it is a policy issue. And the issues we talked about when we talked about redoing that trail included keeping it within reason as natural as possible. So that's maybe a time to come. But this is another example of why I am occasionally reluctant to just say, okay, we'll approve this and let some non-policy making body or council be there, that they would not be involved in anything again. So that's my comment on that one. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All
Can I
right.
respond to that?
Yes, you can, Paul.
Commissioner Cohen, thank you for that. And I want to just clarify that we are not putting signs on the South Shoreline Trail. This artwork would be some kind of non-verbal artwork that would illustrate the interaction between salmon and maybe juvenile salmon and the spawning gravels.
Okay.
That's what I understood you to say, but thank you.
Okay, well, it sounds like, and I don't understand. Obviously at 30% design, we're not, this isn't a done deal at all. This is just, we're taking it to the next step to take it to the council to say like, this has been fleshed out this much. It sounds like there's still some questions about the steps that are ongoing and might need to be modified. I feel like that's not unreasonable in a project to, especially having something unique, to maybe have that be a question mark still. So with the handoff memo, then I guess, how can we proceed with the handoff memo?
Chair, I have one more question,
Okay.
if I may, before you get to the handoff memo.
Yes.
In this, if I may, in this Don Cohen, in the staff report, it refers to, it's on page 2, about the concession. It says food vending would be an operational decision. Now, I didn't remember that a decision had been made by anybody about food vending, however defined. So that's another example of something that I kind of was uncomfortable about. Thank you.
But that's not in the memo, that's in the staff report?
That's in staff report, page 2.
Yeah, from what I understand about what we talked about before with the concession in terms of food, it would be like water and quick energy snacks. Is that right, Paul?
That's correct. It would be prepackaged. I mean, that was a clarifying comment that I put into the response, which is really a carryover from the subcommittee's discussions about this back last fall. So it may have been out of place, but that's been the understanding, from what I understand, since we've talked about the concession stand, that there's not a design issue with how the food would be handled in the concession stand.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Commissioner Markson?
Yeah, I think I was just going to clarify that, I think I was the one that asked the question about concessions and suggested that given that there's going to be more people there and we're going to be renting boats, which it describes in the document that it would be a nice place to have a concession. And so the response made sense to me, that I think you're saying it's not really a design decision, it's an operational decision, and that's totally fine with me. I don't know if maybe there is a decision that we don't offer concessions at any facility, but obviously there's a location for it in the design. So anyway, thanks for the response.
All right, Commissioner Westberg.
Commissioner Westberg, I was just going to add that, again, in response to Don's question, that in fact, the subcommittee did talk about the concession space, but we talked about it from a design standpoint, that as part of the project scope, the space should be made ready to function in some way as a concession, possibly as a concession operation, but without prescribing what that operation would be, who would run it, or anything else. It was simply that from a design standpoint, it needed to be rehabbed, and so it should be included as part of the project scope.
Thank you for that. Vice Chair Struck.
You're on mute.
Oh, for two. Just to tag on to what Commissioner Westberg said, if I recall last fall, when we were, or even last summer when we were just starting out in this process, the commission, if you recall, had kind of went through all the different priorities of all the different amenities and so forth. And if I recall correctly, I believe that kind of food operations was a fairly low scoring amenity. So I think to have something potentially kind of ready or rehab, I think is probably the better word, of that facility is probably okay. But I think that any type of actual food, or whether it be bottled water and chips to something more extensive, I think that's a policy decision that, should really be relayed to later. And I don't think we should, in this document or any document today, put in anything that suggests, well, we think, it should be something like this or that.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think, I think that makes sense as well.
And may I make one comment as well?
Yes.
So the other thing I'd like to remind the commissioners is that this concession stand is mostly intended to be for the programs, the rental programs, the camp programs. It's the place where parents can check in. There's where people can pay for their boat rentals. That's the need for the concession stand. It's the boating programs.
Right. So the concession stand isn't meant to be a food specific concession stand. That's a sort of beside the point, not anything to do with what we're talking about today. Okay, very good. All right, so let's go on to the memo, which I will point out at the, the last part of the memo is issues that were flagged, and talked about, which I think is good, right? We can't have solved all of the problems at 30% design. There's no way that seems reasonable. Yeah, I don't even know where to go from here. We could do a motion, but does anybody have anything else that they want to say about the memo? Commissioner Westberg?
Yeah, overall, I thought it was an excellent memo. Well done, Peter and staff, in drafting this. But I did have one small comment under the cobble beach paragraph, and that is, we put the statement in there: removable mats will provide seasonal access to the water at lower water levels. And my comment was, will the council understand what the function of those mats are, or should we add language to that sentence that says something like for mobility impaired park visitors, or should we just take it out entirely since it's not really a design issue, it's more of an operational thing. So that was my only comment.
I'm fine either way.
All right. Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out as well, on page 2 in the overwater stairs section, in the memo, and I think you probably always read it, but since we talked about it just a few minutes ago, it says here, it's almost it is the last sentence. It says here, for this reason, PRC recommends that an additional safety analysis of the stairs by a specialist with relevant expertise should be included in the scope of work for the 60% design. So I think that does incorporate that kind of extra layer of analysis that we talked about. Thank you.
I agree with that. Okay, I'm going to jump to Council Member Reynolds.
Sure, thanks. I'm going to try not to jump in too much here, but in response to the question a minute ago, mats was one of the things I had flagged. I didn't realize it was about accessibility. So yes, I agree that could use some explanation. And then there are a few other terms in here that I know I would want definition of. One is passive recreation, and one is what constitutes a small powerboat. I think those could both use some definition. And then the last question I have for you is I want to make sure I understand that this design, I take it, is going to require some variances from the code. What sort of variances are required, and what provision of the design necessitates that? And if you guys have already talked about that, I apologize.
No problem. The variances that we need are the light transmission of the outer dock, the width of the dock, and the height of the beam that's supporting the overwater stairs.
So will these have the standard grates that provide light transmission?
The outer dock is being designed to be also a wave attenuator to reduce the wave energy that's coming in from the East Channel. And it can't do that and have the required open grading that the code has.
Okay, that makes sense.
Thank you for those comments, Councilmember Reynolds. Commissioner Cohen?
Don Cohen, just a clarifying question on the mats on the cobbled beach. I thought from previous discussion that the mats were to enable kayak people to pull up and push out kayaks and small craft so that they don't scratch on, I guess, on the bottom. I didn't realize it was an ADA access issue. That's fine with me, but that's the first time that I remember hearing about that. Thank you.
It's actually not, there is no ADA code about those mats. It's an accessibility feature that we're planning to offer operationally. It's not a requirement of the code.
So it sounds like that would be good for us to have that clarified in the memo then, what those are. And those are, so they can be used as ADA, and also it is good for the kayaks and small watercraft beaching, that they don't make holes in them. Is that correct, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, people in kayaks would be welcome to use them for launching.
Yeah, and then so to Councilmember Reynolds' point, we should have some explanation about passive recreation and small power boats for everybody. And passive recreation, Councilmember Reynolds, is sunbathing and different things like that, and just enjoying. That's what it is, right? It's not.
That's correct. It's basically unprogrammed
fishing
or activities that don't require a specific facility. So. Like, it's putting out a blanket and picnicking, or taking a walk. Those are things you don't need. You don't need a tennis court or a swimming pool or dock for that.
Mhm. And then small power boat, what is the maximum length of a small power boat?
It's up to 26 feet. It's that's determined by the grant funding agency, RCO.
So it is
That-
important that we have that in there.
Yeah, they split their grant programs at 26 feet.
It's all a matter of perspective, I guess. To me, 26 feet is pretty darn big, but
I
Yeah,
think it's actually federal. It's that's the way it's split.
that's funny. All right, well, if we have those three clarifications in here, I'm going to, with those three clarifications, can I have a motion to approve the Luther Burbank Docks 30% design? Sorry, Commissioner Westberg.
Well, I raised my hand to offer such a motion.
Okay, very good. All right.
So, I move that the Parks and Recreation Commission recommend to the City Council the approval of the 30% design document and recommend approval of, as well, of the handoff memorandum subject to the changes and clarifications that we just discussed.
All right, and can I have a second, please?
Second.
All right, so there is a motion by Commissioner Westberg and a second by Vice Chair Struck. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones, and will the city staff please conduct a roll call vote?
Chair McCarthy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Struck,
Aye.
Commissioner Cohen,
Well, I'm going to vote aye, but I'm still uncomfortable, but subject to all of the discussion, I'm going to vote aye.
Commissioner Birkenwald,
Aye.
Commissioner Westberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Markson, Commissioner Markson, I'm sorry.
Sorry, aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Burstein.
Aye.
All right, so we have approved that.
Oh, Jody, Don Cohen, what, I
Yes.
had one other small question. What is bison hardwood paneling?
Ooh, I have no idea.
That's supposed to be on the classroom deck area, and what is it, made out of buffaloes or something?
I like to be as specific as possible, so I put in what was in the plan set. It's a laminate wood deck. It's meant for outdoor use, and I guess it's got so much resin and other stuff in it that it doesn't rot.
Just like a buffalo.
What's that?
Just like a buffalo. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Paul. That's fine.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay, the third item of business is the special events policy considerations part 2. And we welcome Katie Herzog, recreational coordinator and special events community partnerships, and consultant Emily Moon.
Hello, good evening. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. All right, how's that looking, everybody?
Good.
Awesome. Okay. Tonight's the follow-up to our January meeting. Tonight, we're going to really focus in on a particular part of the topic we talked about in January. So I'll explain that. So we're going to review the elements of a potential policy that we would bring forward next month during your meeting. We'll have time for questions and answers about those policy elements, and then we'll talk about what the next steps will be. So before I get started on kind of new material, just a couple quick reminders from the January meeting. We wanted to make sure that you had, again, refresher on the definition that we're using for special events, the biggest, most important parts of this definition are that we're talking about events that happen on public property or in the public right of way, or that have impact to the public's use of those spaces, or that may require city services. And tonight, again, we're really focused on just the public special events. You know, the division is also responsible for permitting private special events that occur in those same public spaces, but we're really talking about the public special events tonight. And our hope was to continue to work through January and February on some parameters, some policies, and some practices that we can use to clarify some ambiguity about how the city is approaching special events. So these are our goals for the potential policy, reiterated, summarized briefly, and our intentions. And we're really focused on how to culminate these goals in that last bullet there, how to provide the clarity about the city's role, the level of service and assistance that the city will provide for these third-party public events. So again, we're not as focused on the city events, the city-run, city-organized special events, but those that are run by other entities in the community, but are meant to be public events. So in your staff report, I included some recommendations that don't have to do with the potential sponsorship program that we're going to spend the bulk of our time on tonight. So I just wanted to reiterate what those recommendations are. One concerns the neighborhood block parties practices and just our approach to that. And we're really recommending that we don't change a lot. They've been running fairly smoothly. There's not a proliferation of them that would require that we think about it in a different way. And we believe that there's still a desire on the part of community members, city council, et cetera, to continue to support neighborhood interactions like these. The second piece was about First Amendment or free speech events. We want to clarify that we have to handle those differently. There are just, of course, different federal laws regarding those types of events. And so we want to be very cognizant of that. But we also wanted to be more transparent about how the city will approach them. Most cities have some sort of instruction or guidance on their websites, for example, about these types of events. And we want to make sure that Mercer Island has that as well. We also identified that there are a couple of decisions those event organizers might want to process carefully before they proceed with their event, and give them a heads up that if their free speech event also involves factors that may warrant more city services or have significant impacts to residents, that they may need to go through the special event process. So as an example, that would mean intention to block traffic, or they're going to couple a demonstration or a speech with having food trucks on site. So those elements of those sorts of events would require some additional steps on the part of the event organizer. And then lastly, we are recommending that we be more deliberate about creating these three classifications or big buckets, as I've been referring to them, of special events. The first being the city organized and run events. Think summer celebration, mostly music in the park, things like that. And then a second bucket that is public special events that the city may be providing some level of sponsorship or assistance to. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And then everything else goes in bucket number 3, those public events that the city isn't providing sponsorship for, and all the private events. So I'm going to pause here for one quick second. Were there any questions about those other pieces of our recommendations. I'll go back one slide too.
All right, Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen. Emily, so I saw those three things, and then later on, there's a level 4 event referred to. Is that something else, or am I reading apples and oranges?
Apples and oranges,
Okay.
Commissioner.
Okay.
Those level 4 events would be part of this second bullet here, public special events, where we'd be providing some sponsorship. There's 4 levels in the proposed sponsorship program.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you, Peter Struck. So on the neighborhood block parties, I do those generally, at least I think of our neighborhood. I mean, it's a private party. It's not a public event. It's on public property. So I'm not suggesting changing anything. I think I would just add that something along the fact that, you know, these are primarily private parties, so that I guess the community doesn't think that, you know, everybody's invited, if you will.
Sure. And I appreciate that, Vice Chair. We are thinking about those as being separate from public events, a different classification. So in the staff report, I actually said that the city-run events, the public events where we might have sponsorship, and then all others were kind of exclusive of those other considerations for neighborhood block parties and free speech events. We have more to say on those 2 things. But you're right, the block parties, we will be very explicit in our description of those on the city's website and on the form that we're going to ask neighborhood organizers to fill out. And they cross over the line from being a neighborhood block party to being a community-wide special event if hopefully the organizer has told us that their intention is for it to be bigger, that they're going to advertise it, that they're going to have some sort of draw like food truck that would kick them over into a different category of an event. Neighborhood block parties will be defined as being for neighborhood residents, as the neighborhood defines itself, and will be kind of homey in nature. So it'll involve potluck or neighborhood barbecue, but it won't be that sort of thing where you would have food trucks or outside entertainment coming in or anything like that that might draw a different crowd.
Okay, thank you for that. I would just suggest on the food truck, I mean, I think what you're finding now, a lot of neighborhood groups are effectively saying, well, rather than, you know, 10 years or 20 years ago, they would do a potluck, that they have now said, well, you know, we'll have a food truck come in or bring food in just because it's a lot easier, and, you know, charge attendees $5 or well, your $10, whatever it is. So I think that if you put that food truck requirement issue in there or lack thereof, that could present some issues. Secondly, just as on these neighborhood groups, currently, is there any kind of liability insurance requirement, or is that something just the city absorbs that potential risk?
I believe right now, and Katie, you can jump in, I believe the city does not require any liability insurance. Our thought being, again, if we can kind of define it in a way that controls some risk, and the city has not had an issue with that.
Okay,
today.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to move on, and we're going to talk about the city sponsorship of public special events. This is the bulk of what we want to talk about tonight. I've just cut and paste, maybe summarized, taking out just a few words here or there to get the elements of the proposed policy onto these slides for you. So this is the first half of those recommended policy elements. And I'm going to just briefly describe them for people that might be listening in or get information better when it's verbalized. So the first part of this sponsorship program that we're proposing. And the sponsorship program is meant to, again, help us to attain those goals that we described in your packet and that we talked about in January. We want to make sure that we are able to support community events that are desired and that have positive impact on the community, but that aren't necessarily organized and run by the city. And the city has had past sponsorship of different sorts to many of these events. And that's something that we think brings value, not only to the organizations, but also to all the attendees and residents. So the policy elements include, the biggest one is that it would be a fee waiver or fee reduction type program, where we assist different sizes of events to different magnitudes. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. We wanted to make sure that the program was administratively feasible. And so we looked at different designs that other cities use. Sometimes cities have really robust grant application type programs with strict criteria that needs to be met, or as we discussed in January, they only allow organizations to apply to receive sponsorship once a year. And so those organizations really have to have their act together and be well prepared in order to make a successful application for sponsorship. And then other cities also put a time limit on the number of years that those organizations can receive funding, believing that it should be more seed money for those organizations to get their events off the ground. And then after, say, a period of 3 years, they're not eligible. So we think that starting off this program for Mercer Island, it makes sense and it's administratively feasible for the staff, that those requests can be made at any time, but they have to be made in conjunction with applying for the special event permit, and they have to follow those rules and those deadlines as well. And then another important element of the potential events that would be eligible for this program is that they obviously have to be public in nature. They can't be private events. And we have some language in here that's meant to send some signals. It may not be perfectly defined in the policy, but again, as we have talked about with other policies that you all have considered, we want to have something to hang our hat on. And so here on that third to last bullet, we say not only do the events need to be public, but they need to be inclusive in nature. And this might be one of those things where when you see it, you know it. When it's absent, you also know it. But this would allow staff that if they receive a proposal, and I'm going to make a ridiculous example for you. So if they receive a proposal that says, we're going to have a public event that celebrates blonde-haired people, right? Maybe that's okay, but maybe in the description of their event, they go on to send some signals that anyone without blonde hair just wouldn't feel like this event is welcoming to them, right? So in those cases, the staff may ask some more questions and begin to discern whether or not this is the type of event that would be appropriate for the city to sponsor. It's truly public, truly open, and welcoming to any potential participant. Okay, political parties, politically based organizations, lobbying groups, again, separation of public funds from kind of private endeavors, making sure we have the appropriate separation. So those types of organizations and events would not be eligible. The last bullet here is one we've talked about at staff level quite a bit. There are religious entities on the island that have received some level of assistance for their community events in the past. We believe that all of the case law would suggest that it's important for us to be able to offer city sponsorship across the board to organizations, including religious entities, but that it is also appropriate from a case law standpoint to ensure that those events are not religious in nature. So they don't include religious worship, instruction, that sort of thing. So I put in blue here in the small print some updated language from the city attorney's office on this point. Just differs just slightly. I've underlined those pieces that differ from what you have in your packet. Intent is the same, outcome is the same. But I wanted all of you to know that we're working closely with the city attorney's office on a lot of this and making sure that we have language that they can support. Okay, now let's go to the next one. This first bullet here is another one of those ones like we had in the facility use and allocation policy. Just allows staff to dig in a little deeper, make sure that the nature of the event is one that's consistent with the division's mission. So we've included some verbiage here to help us to apply that. We also had some discussion in our January meeting with you about events that may be used as fundraisers, whether it would be appropriate for the city to also sponsor those types of events. And I think the general consensus from the commission at that point in time was that it may not be as important whether or not the event was a fundraiser than the fact that a lot of those groups that may generate some funds from those events are also turning those funds into services that are provided to community members, and that ultimately is what the city would like to support. And so we've included an opportunity here to partner with entities on their events, even if those events might be fundraising events. And Chair, I'm going to stop here because I know we have at least two hands up. Be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Cohen.
Yes, thank you, Don Cohen. I have two questions. They're on the first two bullets on this page. So give me, Emily, if you can, an example of an event that would be denied under the first bullet, but not the, I don't know, however you describe, not the crazy example of all blonde people. What would be something? This same question I've asked kind of before, and we've tried to get some examples before. What would be one of those in the real world?
Yeah, Commissioner, I'm not sure that I have a great example, particularly from Mercer Island's history. I don't know that you have had this kind of thing. What I have seen in other cities that I have worked in typically are events that are cast as kind of free speech events, but have other elements to them that then become special events, and again are events that are meant to divide community and may even speak to harming residents in the community. So I don't have a specific example for you. I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to A, see those events request permits in the community, and B, have those events request sponsorship from the city. I think they just opt out of that. But if I had to try to come up with an example right now, I have to come up with another silly one. Maybe it's something to do with advocating for illicit drug use. And that's maybe just inconsistent with the City of Mercer Island and the Rec Division's mission.
Okay, I find that answer only partially satisfactory, but maybe that's inherent in that one is. On the second bullet, thank you. On the second bullet, given what you said about the second bullet, well, I don't understand too well. I'm a little confused by the wording. Events may or may not be used as fundraisers and may or may not require a registration or participation fee. So that really means that they may be used as fundraisers, right?
Correct.
Okay. I didn't understand. I guess now I understand it. I'm not sure the wording was clear to me when I read it, and I read it a couple of times, but but I'll leave that to you. Thank you.
Sure. No, I appreciate that feedback. When we put it into final format and the policy template, we'll try to clarify that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Westberg.
Commissioner Westberg, thank you. I also, Emily, have a question on the second bullet, and that is, if an event, if the sole purpose of an event is a fundraiser, would that be allowable under that bullet? Or is fundraising incidental to a broader purpose that might serve community needs and values a little better? I don't recall where our discussion ended up last time, but
that's an excellent point, Commissioner. I don't think that we took our conversation quite that far last time. I think what Mercer Island has experienced in the past is that, well, you all can help me to find what is incidental, right? So if you have a particular service organization, let's say, that is running a children's fair with a kids fun run, and they're going to take registration fees for the fun run aspect of that special event, and they're going to use proceeds to fund, service club operations in the next year. Is that incidental, or is that wholly labeled a fundraiser? I don't know that we even on staff side were thinking about, do we need to, or how would we measure what portion of the event is related to fundraising?
Well, an event that comes to my mind is the Youth and Family Services breakfast that happens traditionally at the community center and before times. That to me seems like a city combo, because it's the foundation, not just the Youth and Family Services.
Sure. And Chair, just to clarify, we have the facility use and allocation policy, and that speaks to the fees that are associated with rentals of the facility for fundraising. No,
totally. But I'm just thinking about an example of a community partnership thing.
Right.
That's working together, where it is a fundraiser for the community, but the city is definitely helping, even though that one is in the community center, not specifically in a park.
Very good.
Commissioner. Sorry, go Katie.
I'm Katie Herzog, Recreation Coordinator. Just to kind of build off of the example you gave, the YFS Foundation used to run their pumpkin walk, and that was also a fundraiser for the foundation, and they put on a great event in Luther Burbank Park. So while they were fundraising, they were also putting on an event, and that would be a wonderful example of something that they could take our sponsorships for. I think we gave a few other examples last time as well. Maybe the Preschool Association is holding some sort of, carnival in our park where they are going to sell tickets. And again, that money can be used for their preschool association, or perhaps they're raising funds for YFS, which they've done in the past. So those types of fundraisers are very popular. for special events, and they would definitely be able to apply for this sponsorship.
Thank you. Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you. I guess it's my turn on bullet number 2. Yeah, I'm a little, I think, based on what Don and Rory kind of talked about, trying to understand, what is what. The one thing I think about here is, essentially how much money is being raised. Because if you look at the proposed fee reductions or permit, and so forth, I just kind of averaged it out. Maybe it's $250 or $350. So it's not a big number. So if somebody comes and says, well, we're going to do a fundraiser, and maybe it's that kids run, but we're hoping to raise between $5,000 and $7,000. Well, then I kind of say, I'm not sure that you really need that fee reduction. It'd be nice to have, but given that we have a budget, is that in fact the best use of the funds and so forth. So that's kind of how I think about that. I guess the other way that you can kind of help with that is, where you talked about, well, a particular entity, it's going to be seed money. So if they do this fund run every year, after the first couple of times or 3 times, then they're kind of on their own. And maybe that's a better way to get at it. But yeah, I'm a little bit troubled with kind of how do you kind of slice and say, well, year in and year out on these registration fees or participation fees and so forth. I think there needs to be a little more clarity, I guess, is maybe my conclusion. Thank you.
Chair, I'd love to pause here on that and see if there's a consensus across the commission about changing that bullet.
Yeah, I see that Commissioner Burstein has his hand up, so maybe he's got some.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Burstein. I just wanted to make sure that we're setting guidelines and not strict qualifications for sponsorship. So there's still some discretionary decision-making by staff whether or not a sponsorship would occur. Is that true?
I'm sorry, I didn't recognize that as a question, more as a comment. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that we're setting
Sure.
up something that sets up guidelines for a discretionary decision to be made.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm going to answer your question by saying our hope is to try to reduce the amount of discretionary decision-making because right now we have no parameters. And so our goal is to create more guidance, as you're suggesting, but to limit as much as possible the amount of discretion that enters into the decision-making. Where I'd like to keep that discretion is on these points that deal with kind of the nature of the event, the impact of the event. And I'd rather have hard and fast rules about, for example, whether or not events that include some sort of registration fee or are being used as a fundraiser are okay for sponsorship or not okay.
So maybe on that second bullet, it should say something like events that include fundraising, registration, or participation fees may be considered in approving any sponsorship by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen, still on that point. I'm still in favor of not putting limits on the fundraising and not, with all respect to Commissioner Burstein, not doing, a little looser language there. This came up on the facilities policy with the community center. I remember Council Member Jacobson saying we ought to welcome, with limitations, of course, we ought to welcome anybody who wants to use this. It's good for the city as long as it isn't impacting negatively somebody else. So I'm in favor of basically saying it's okay if you're going to use it as a fundraiser or you're going to take a fee. And to get into the nuances of is it a $250 fee and they're getting $5,000 or anything, to me, that is antithetical to what I understand staff was trying to accomplish. And I'm okay with what they're trying to accomplish in this particular instance. Thank you.
Commissioner Westberg.
So just so we can maybe wrap up discussion of this item, Don, you're proposing that we simplify this language to say that events may be used as fundraisers and may not require a registration or participation fee, or may require a registration or participation fee. I'm just trying to get it where it's some language that we can settle on.
Yeah, that would probably work. I was going to leave that to staff because they're going to come back with the actual.
Okay, that's fine with me, but I think as long as we're sort of on the same page.
But that, yes, is Don Code, but that's the kind of thing I was talking about, just to clarify the may or may not, what that meant.
Commissioner Burstein.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I think I'm in agreement with you completely. I think being able to fundraise and have participant fees are perfectly okay when the city is sponsoring an event.
All right, so the general consensus is that we agree with the meaning, but the sentence might need to be tweaked a little bit to make it clearer. Okay, let's go on to the next bullet then.
Okay, great. Thank you all for your input. So the other pieces that we wanted to clarify in the policy, again, these would be not only part of the policy, but part of the sponsorship program instructions to potential applicants. Include that sports tournaments would not be eligible for the sponsorship. And our thought process on that was that those tournaments are a little different than a community-wide public event. Usually have teams and organizations that have registered ahead of time, and it's not like other people who are not on those teams or part of those organizations can come and participate in those activities. And typically those organizations are paying some different types of fees to the city for field preparation, et cetera. So they're just different animals. And so we wanted to just clarify that even though sports tournaments may go through some of the same procedural steps to get permitted as other special events, they won't be eligible for sponsorship from the city. We also wanted to put a bit of a cap on the number of sponsorships each organization could get in a year. We said 2, and looking back over the city's history, we feel this covers the vast majority of organizations that have planned events in the community in a given year. And then we stated that staff is responsible for reviewing the application for the sponsorship and the permit, and will, as Commissioner Burstein talked about, will make sure that everything has been done as it should, and then issue permits and the sponsorship as required. And then we wanted to make sure it was clear to everyone that any entity that receives a sponsorship, any entity actually that gets a special event permit, enters into a contract with the city. And that's part of the way that the city ensures that those entities have the appropriate insurance and other things that are required by the city. So that contract would also be a place where the city could spell out what the public is getting for that sponsorship. We think that's a really important thing to do. it will keep the city in good standing with regard to the state law on the gift of public funds. So any questions about the rest of the elements of the proposed policy?
Councilmember Reynolds.
Yes, I apologize. I'm actually going to take you one slide back on this.
Sure.
Or I have one question on this, and I'm not going to take a stand either way as to what the issue is, the right decision is, but I just know it's going to come up at council. And that's the first one about an agency serving Mercer Island residents. To what extent have you talked about that and made a conscious decision between that wording and a possible alternative wording of serving exclusively or primarily Mercer Island residents?
Sure.
I want to make sure that the wording that is there is deliberate, and then you've thought about it.
Great. Thank you for the question. Yes, is the answer. We have thought about it. And I didn't include this on the slide. It's referenced, I think, in the packet materials, but we're intending to use the same definition that we used in the facility use and allocation policy that the Parks and Rec Commission has endorsed. And I don't have that in front of me, but it goes something like this. It defines nonprofit agencies serving Mercer Island residents as those entities that can count as the recipients of their services. To be 75% of those recipients are Mercer Island residents.
Okay, so even though it doesn't say it here, the primarily is implied.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on.
Great. Okay, so then the policy would be implemented, and the sponsorships that would be possible, at least the way that we're proposing them, are to waive the level 1 event fee. Again, there's different components of fees. So every special event permit applicant pays an application fee. But we have a second component of the fee that we call the event fee. So we'd waive it for a level 1 event. These are the smallest events, the lowest impact. They demand the least amount of city services to support. We have several of those events typically in Mercer Island. The next level would be level 2 events, a little higher impact, a little more review is needed, can hold a bit more participants, attendees. They would get 60% discount, and then we reduce the discount from there, 40% for level 3, 20% for the largest types of events, the highest impact events, the events that need the most staff involvement.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes, Don Cohen. So Emily, maybe I missed it, but will the 1, 2, 3, and 4 level events, will that be described or defined in the policy that you then work up? You know, I don't know what kind of events you're talking about when based on your description. No offense.
Yes. No, they're lengthy descriptions. Katie and I can help you to understand what kind of events would fit into each category. And the definitions have been constructed in part to reflect the types of events that Mercer Island has seen in the past and our experience with those events. So we have a good handle on what level of effort, what impact comes from different styles of events, sizes of events. So yes, those levels will be described in the policy. They'll also be part of course, the special event application packet because they're tied to fees, not just the sponsorship program. And they would be described in the sponsorship program. So a level 1 event, Katie, do you have descriptions in front of you?
Yeah.
Level 1 event, I think, is an event Special events have a minimum attendance. We don't call something a special event if it has fewer than 50 people. And for example, you can book a picnic shelter for fewer than 50 people. And we don't want to get into conflicts where just because you're booking a picnic shelter, now you have a special event and you have to go through that process. So special events start at 50 people. I think the first level goes from 50 to, Katie?
100.
100 people. So it's a very short band, but that actually captures quite a bit of the smaller events that are happening in the community. And those events only require Katie's review, really, because they by definition will not involve certain things like other permits that would be required by the city, say from the fire marshal's office or police department services. So at each event level, the amount of impact, the amount of city services and the review goes up, but also the number of anticipated attendees goes up.
Thank you. So does Katie have, Don Cohen, Katie, do you have at your disposal what the number of people is for 3 and 4?
Yeah, so level 3 hits like 251 people to 600. And then level 4 is kind of anything over 600, but also, has major impacts to the surrounding areas such as streets, the business district. Think like a parade would be a great example where streets are getting closed, safety measures are needing to be taken so cars aren't driving through a parade or people aren't getting hurt, barricades are out. So anything kind of large like a parade or a swimming event, Swim Across America has had events at Luther Burbank Park, which has required, as you can imagine, a lot of safety efforts. So those would be those level 4. And then level 3, kind of that 251 to 600 people, still some major impacts to parks, like a 5K maybe in Luther Burbank, taking up the whole park, large amount of people. That's probably the best example of 5K run in the park.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've made this comment, Don Cohen, I've made this comment before, but at least for me, getting some of those examples when I'm looking through some of these policy proposals for the first time would give me better context, and I probably have to take less time of other people at the meeting itself. But anyway, thank you. That's helpful.
All right, Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you. And I concur with Commissioner Cohen's last comment about examples. I think that is very helpful to the commissioners. But regarding this policy, I think it was either the last meeting or maybe there was an email about we're talking about what 10, 15, 20, 25 events under this policy. I mean, based on at least historical standards. Is that about right?
That's correct.
Yeah, on average, maybe 6 to 10 a year.
6 to 10. Okay. So I think that helps people to kind of, because you're going to set a budget for council and so forth. So, we're not talking maybe, $10,000. I don't know what the number is, but it's not really a huge number when it all is said and done. Thank you.
All right.
Great. Okay. And just a reminder, I think this was in your packet as well. The department director has the municipal code authority to set the fees. So that's not what we're bringing to you tonight. We're really focused on the policy questions, not on who is paying what, but really this question about shall we give any sort of discount to anyone and how would we define that? Those are the policy questions. So we did this. This was your task, was to review and discuss, and we did that as we went along, those policy elements. And at this point, I'd love to hear any additional feedback that you have about the program design, And then our intent is to take this feedback, make some of the changes that you have suggested, and put this into the final form, which you have seen in previous policies, and give you a chance to look over it one last time. And then if that's what you need, and then take it forward to City Council and seek their approval of the policy. Because again, while we haven't done that with the facility use and allocation policy, during our reset work, we identified certain policies that we felt were administrative in nature that staff would create and adopt on its own, certain policies that the commission would be involved in, and then certain policies that were likely to need to go before City Council. And since this involves, budget, we want to make sure that the City Council is adopting a policy they are comfortable with. So Chair, if there's any additional feedback, any thoughts on overall program design, love to hear that.
All right, thank you. Well, I feel like everybody asked questions as we went along, so hopefully that gave you enough of a sense of what things need to be clarified. I don't see anybody else's hand up, so I think that's great. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so I already reviewed this, but I just wanted to also clarify one last thing. When we take forward the policy to City Council, we're going to narrow it down just to be about the sponsorship policy. So these other aspects that we've spoken to you about, those aren't necessarily things that we're going to package together with the sponsorship policy. So the discussion about keeping the neighborhood block parties essentially the same may get mentioned in a staff report, but it's not going to be part of the policy. We want to make sure we have a very clean, tight focus for the policy.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, so moving on to the fourth item of business, which is the update on the 2021 ARPA Deferred Parks Maintenance Project. And we welcome Sam Harb, Parks Operations Manager.
Good evening. Good to be with you all tonight. I'm going to be speaking about the 2001 Parks Deferred Maintenance work. And go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you all see that?
Yes.
Great. All right, so a little bit of background. In 2020, with COVID restrictions, parks maintenance had a significant amount of backlog of work that they didn't get done just due to staffing and focusing on very specific things, just pretty much essential work. And it was identified that there was a good amount of planter beds that were neglected during this time. And in July of 2021, council allocated $200,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act to help restore planter beds in parks to a manageable state. And the purpose of this work was to basically get things back in order to where they would be, easier to maintain on a routine basis. So a lot of these areas just required a lot of time-intensive work. Staff went around and assessed planter beds to develop a full scope of needs. So going around and basically inventorying areas and looking at what was needed where, and just developing a comprehensive scope of work. Starting in July of last year, city crews began this work, and I want to point out that this is in addition to all their regular park maintenance work that they were engaged in. And in addition to park crews, it was also other public works crews, utilities, seasonal help, all kinds of folks were involved in this. We also were able to get 2 landscape contractors to work on get them on a time and materials type agreement. And as they were available, it was a little bit late in the season, but as they were available, they were able to help us out in certain areas. These maps highlight kind of an overview of the different work areas. Each one of these regions is associated with a schedule of work where all the planter beds were looked at and listed to see what was needed at all of them. So a lot of the area taking place in Aubrey Davis, starting with Aubrey Davis Lid West, Lid East, Town Center, Aubrey Davis East, North Island Parks, and South Island Parks, with sort of Southeast 40th Street as the cutoff between North and South. Work tasks. So the specific tasks that were done at all these planter beds, or at least looked at within the scope of work, included definition of bed edges, line trimming, grasses and ivy, mulching, ornamental mulch or arborist wood chips, just depending on the area, planter box cleanup, pruning of shrubs, pruning of trees, pruning to provide trail clearance, invasive species removal, especially blackberry and ivy, removal of dead vegetation, so dead shrubs, trees, wood, things like that. Also removal of ivy from shrubs and trees, and hedge trimming and weeding. So as I said earlier, I pointed out that staff went out and kind of looked at all the planter beds. This is an example of one of the areas. This is for the South Island Parks. And basically, every planter bed has an ID and an area square footage, and some of them needed more work than others. The green represents finished work done in these planter beds. Orange or yellowish represents areas that have been worked on that are in progress, and then pink would be just still needing to get started on. And then, as you see on the top of the table there, it has some of those specific planter bed tasks that were pointed out. So Aubrey Davis represents a pretty big part of this area. Most of it, actually, the area totals, I think, 18.2 acres, and 16.2 of that is in Aubrey Davis. So being such a big park with lots of planter beds, this was just where a big focus of the work was. And that's kind of where we started. And that's where a big amount of time was, primarily in high visible spots and overpasses, things like that. So total scoped area for Aubrey Davis was 16.2 acres. Total completed area, 5.6 acres. Remaining work in progress, 10.6. Some additional information about Aubrey Davis Park. Some notable completed areas include 76th Avenue overpass, I-90 trail along Sunset Highway, 77th, 80th overpasses, Island Crest Way overpass, Luther Burbank overlook, Shorewood, North Mercer Way overpass, and East Mercer Way overpass. And I also want to point out that some of these areas are at this point at a basic state. So again, the intention of a lot of this work was to get things manageable so that future maintenance would be easier. So just want to point that out. If you notice some of these areas that are more just bare, they have been worked in, but a lot of the maybe invasive vegetation is removed and they're sort of ready to be moved on to the next step. Going back, so this is on, I think, 77th kitty corner from the Chevron. This is the crew removing a bunch of ivy. Pretty labor intensive work, and just depending on availability and area and who was available or what equipment was available. Sometimes this was handwork, sometimes, you know, we're using excavators, backhoes, tractors, that kind of thing, or equipment that contractors had available to them. Here's a couple nice, pretty well finished looking planter beds in the art park. So to find planter bed edges, tree rings, mulching. The mulching definitely gives it a nice, clean, finished look, and some of those, you know, well seen and well used park areas also adds, you know, organic content to the soil, keeps moisture in the soil during the dry season. So other island parks, these are some of the other regions besides Island Crest. These include Mercerdale, Bicentennial, Island Crest, Homestead, Luther Burbank, Rotary, Clark Beach, and Groveland Beach. The progress for this area, total scoped area, 2.1 acres. So definitely less significant size compared to Aubrey Davis. Total completed area, 1.27 acres, remaining work in progress, 0.83. A couple of these pictures are Mercerdale and Bicentennial. One thing to note is that for this project, you can see these areas, or the flagpole area there is freshly planted. This project specifically didn't include planting. That work was part of kind of a different project, but the work before that, you know, as far as getting it ready to be planted, was part of it. A couple other photos. Top left, you've got 80th overpass, and top right, another angle of the Bicentennial Plaza area. And then bottom left, team member looks like over at Groveland Beach with a lot of vegetation in the back of the truck, and then crew on the bottom right at the Mercerdale hedges doing some planting. So 2021 summary and next steps. I do want to note that my final numbers here have a slight discrepancy from the staff report. I think in the staff report, I highlighted 7.4 acres completed, and after I recalculated it, 6.83. And then the total expenditure in the staff report was, I think, $120,847, and the final number for 2021 was actually like $1,000 more, so, or a little less than $1,000 more. So just want to point that out. So yeah, 6.83 acres completed, which is 37% of the total area identified in the original scope of work. $121,340 spent on labor and materials through 2021. And that includes just over $90,000 of contracted landscaping crews, 2 different companies that were helping us out, and $31,000 of city crew time. Where we're at now, as of last month, January, we've had city crews and contracted crews continuing this work. So whereas last year we started in July, halfway throughout the year, we're getting a good start on it this year. In addition to getting ready for the busy season of regular park maintenance. So we plan to continue this work throughout the year, both with city crews and contractors. And then the next step would be identifying areas that need further enhancement, such as plantings and irrigation repairs, because that's kind of another thing that was identified in a lot of areas, is that just figuring out where it's feasible or makes sense to repair broken irrigation that maybe hasn't been on in a couple of years, and selecting plants that are appropriate for those areas and locations and soil types. All right, that's my last slide. Any questions on that?
It doesn't look like we have any questions. Thank you for that.
Council member?
Oh.
Sure. Just very quickly, if I did my math right, we've spent about 60% of the budget, give or take, and completed about 37% of the work, or at least the land area.
Yep.
That's kind of out of sync, but maybe it's because you did the hard areas that needed it the most first. But do you think you can still finish it, or approximately so?
Yeah, I mean, at face value, I think looking a little over a third of the area, 37%. Yeah, that the areas we focused on were the time intensive ones that we just knew we wouldn't have, you know, regular capacity to do and spend a lot of time and labor doing that. So we focused on those. So area is not exactly apples to apples. So the areas we focused on were more time intensive. So I expect later in this year to have, if not having this entire scope done, at least having the harder areas or the labor intensive areas down to a manageable level, to where the lesser time intensive areas can just be handled within our regular work plan.
Okay, so it sounds good. It looks beautiful. Thank you.
And also we've had a ton, like many places, we've had a lot of staffing changes, and we're all staffed up now, and we have lots of you know, motivated employees that are take a lot of ownership in these public lands.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yeah, Don Cohen. Sam, thank you for that report. You know, I mean, all of us see the crews and contractors working in various places, but to get a description of it in the context of where and how much and who's doing what, I really enjoyed, for example, the chart or whatever you called it that had all of the areas, well, at least the south end ones, and the various tasks and at what stage they were. It was very, very interesting. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I have plenty of spreadsheets to go with all this stuff.
Commissioner Westberg?
Thanks. This is Commissioner Westberg. Sam, I just had a quick comment and then a question. The comment is, I really liked your table with all the tasks listed across the top. It looks a lot like my spring honeydew list. So I may have to get a copy of it from you so I can track my own progress as I go through the spring renovation process. But I wanted to ask you just real quick, how do you make decisions about what plants to put in? And are you guided by considerations of sustainability, ease of maintenance, and water-wise type plants?
Yeah, so I guess it depends if it's more of an ornamental area or native area. Some of these planter bed areas are more native area where they might not need as many plant installations, because as long as the invasive stuff is kept down, then the new or the native stuff does fine. Or if we do supplemental planting, it's kind of keeping that same palette. We haven't done a ton of new planting in these areas, but you might have seen last summer the Island Crestway median, and as well as think there was a couple other more right-of-way planter bed areas, and then Mercerdale and Bicentennial. And for those specifically, that was part of a different project where we had a landscape architect that we were working with to develop those plant lists and things. So it's kind of taken on a case-by-case basis, but first just looking at what's there, and if we don't have irrigation to support certain plants, then we're going to look at that, and if we need to, do research, or if we need to keep up a theme of plants that are adjacent to a planter bed that's maybe bare, and we want to make it look uniform, then we might take that approach. Otherwise, we have staff that are pretty knowledgeable on this stuff, and they're able to make good recommendations and choices for what to plant.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm just jumping on here. I didn't realize that Sam and I had coordinated outfits. I'm Elaine Summergren, Director for Public Works. I've been listening to the conversation and wanted to jump in on just a couple of things. I think Sam's covered it really well, but one of the things that I wanted to mention was Councilmember Reynolds, you had brought up that wondering sort of about our progress versus our budget. And I want to just harken back to the planning session when this first came in front of council. The original ask was actually for $400,000, which we thought was actually a more adequate amount for the amount of acreage that we wanted to cover. So the $200,000 was really just to chip off the most the most egregious planter bed issues. I've got company here. So I think there's a possibility as we get further into this year that we may end up coming back to council to request additional ARPA funds or something like that. But we really need to make it as far as we can through this current budget and find out how far this money can go. So I suspect that we'll do a follow-up to this a little bit later on.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I actually didn't remember the 400,000 request. Maybe that was whittled down to 200 before it came to council. I don't recall. Or maybe it's my old man memory kicking in.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Sam and Elaine. Let's move on to our fifth item of business, which is the department report and update from Meryl.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sitting in for Ryan Daly this evening. Give me one sec to share my screen, please. Ryan prepared the slides tonight, folks. So if you see any misspellings, don't blame me. All right. Department report. Some quick updates. The Mercerdale playground, if you've been in the area lately, you'll see some activity. In mid-December, the crews finished installing the new train sculpture. It's quite a sight to see coming in there. And the rest of the playground structures are being worked on this week. We have a little bit of a weather window we need to catch, dry and slightly warmer, in order to get the surfacing down. So that's one thing that we're kind of waiting on. And then we're looking to schedule a ribbon cutting toward the end of December, or excuse me, end of February. So we'll keep you posted on that. Of course, you can track the project on its Let's Talk page. The community center, as you know, we've stalled a little bit in expanding our hours and our offerings, but we are on track to do that soon. The art gallery is open. I was in on Tuesday and saw some people wandering around looking at art, which was nice to see after so long. And then we're starting to train the front desk staff up on taking reservations. So we're still rentals. We're still a little bit limited in the spaces we're doing that, but that's actually been kind of a nice slow rollout to get everybody on the same page on how to do those bookings and remind ourselves how all that works. You can check out our website for hours and the additional offerings that we have. I've also heard Raven reported bigger and bigger numbers of indoor playground in the gym, which is fun. The weather isn't great for getting your kids out to play, so it's nice to have a space to do that again. We are looking forward to better weather and planning now for summer camps. So we had a really popular, busy year last summer with summer camps. A lot of success in contracting out with our partners most of those camps. So we're looking to do that again and getting together marketing materials very soon as parents are starting to think about what their kids are going to do this summer. We'll keep you posted on that too once we have those offerings all together. You can't get away from some pros plan commentary on one of these meetings. So the 2022 pros plan is now in the final draft stage, as you all know. We've got a full discussion and public hearing planned for February 15th with the City Council, and I believe we'll focus a little more on the CIP and that 20-year project list that you spent so much time on then with the council. The feedback period for the SEPA review and in general for the council to hear is on now. And folks can do that at the Let's Talk page. They can email the council. And of course, they can give feedback during public appearances on the 15th as well. Just keeping in your mind, the North Mercer Island Ennetai Sewer Upgrade Project is around the corner. I will say I went to the website today and the King County site just keeps saying construction starting soon. So I don't know exactly what soon is, but what they have right now is a survey out, especially for residents kind of in that area along the Aubrey Davis Trail there and on North Mercer Way. There's a survey open specifically about construction communication. So how folks want to know when things are happening, how they can give feedback when they notice things or hear things that are troublesome to them. So that survey is linked here on the King County site, and we encourage residents, especially kind of around Luther Burbank Park, to complete that survey by the 8th. We have a restoration event with our Earthcore partners this weekend at the Upper Luther Burbank Bike Skills area. So planting trees, and folks have to register for this one on our website, the link on our website through Earthcore. The Aubrey Davis Park Trail Safety Improvement Project virtual meeting is coming up on the 17th. So Paul will host that, and there'll be some online surveys and designs to check out and that sort of thing. The project has a page on Let's Talk as usual, and we'll certainly keep you posted on this, especially once we get some feedback and get some consensus around the early design of the project. And that's all we have. I'm happy to answer questions or ask my colleagues to pop in if anyone has questions.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Just a quick one on the Upper Luther Burbank restoration. You said this weekend, but the slide said the 12th, which is actually weekend, right?
I'm sorry, that is next weekend. I'm moving.
Okay, just wanted to confirm it was right.
Thank you. So a little more time for folks to sign up if they'd like to.
Okay.
Commissioner Westberg.
Meryl, I just had a quick question on the same topic. You mentioned the planning project would be completed before the build out of the course. Do you have final recommendations from the consultant and a design as far as what is going to happen there on the ground?
Well, you know, Elaine, if you are still joining us, she might be the best person to give us a small update on that, as I'm not super well versed. Hi. You're on mute, Elaine. There you go.
If you don't mind stopping the share, I will jump on here and
Oh, am I still sharing?
update. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Elaine Summergren, Deputy Public Works Director again. Hi again. So yes, I'm happy to jump on and just give a quick update on the bike skills area. So we are waiting for the final report from the consultant still. Unfortunately, he did have some delays related to COVID with his family and is now about a month behind. So we are expecting to get a draft of the report within the next couple days, and then hopefully the final report by mid-February. So as soon as we get that and are able to review those recommendations, we'll be pushing those out via the Let's Talk page. So keep an eye there for updates. We will keep that updated regularly with news. In terms of next steps, I can't really speak to that until we get his final recommendations. So there will certainly be follow-up with the Parks and Rec Commission once we start to discuss those.
Thanks, Elaine.
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes, Don Cohen. This is a question about the Let's Talk page. I know that there are a lot of people who use that very consistently and some people who don't. Does staff have a sense that that has yet achieved the overall kind of communication imprimatur that you had hoped it would be? Because you still see things on Nextdoor when people complain that they'd never even heard of Let's Talk. And to tell you the truth, I rarely go to the Let's Talk page, but maybe I search out other stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's probably still consistent. We put a lot on Let's Talk. It's a user-friendly tool for staff to use, and it's compliant with public records and all of that kind of stuff. So that's our chosen platform. We know that other social media sites are kind of where a lot of people share information. But, especially as things have moved virtual, we have found much more engagement there for various projects. So we feel like it's a success and a useful tool, and has been so more and more over the last couple of years.
I'll say for specific projects, I think it's actually a very useful tool, because when people find that they are invested or interested in a certain type of project, like the bike skills area, they can actually receive notifications whenever anything is updated within that page. So I know that we've had really good communication with folks that are interested specifically in that project that are spurred by the notifications they receive. So I think we try to do a lot of cross-posting to Facebook and other avenues, the MI Weekly, in order to draw people there continuously and remind them that that's where we're posting updates.
Thank you. This is Don Cohen again. Does the city website somewhere say that the city uses Let's Talk for communications, and you should go look at that?
Typically, Commissioner Cohen, I think, we will have a landing page for various projects or for various divisions or departments that then will direct folks back to the Let's Talk page to link to the Let's Talk page. So if you look up the bike skills area on the Parks and Rec webpage, it'll take you to that Let's Talk page. I don't know that there is a kind of overarching message about Let's Talk on the city's website. At least that's very clear. I can certainly look into that and recommend that it be made more clear if that might be helpful.
Well, I guess anything we can do to get important information out and try to minimize criticism that we're not doing that, as long as it isn't overly burdensome, would make sense, at least from my point of view. Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Burstein?
Just recognize that it is up on the website. If you go to the Mercer Island Gov website under services, it says contact the city, and there you can go right to Let's Talk.
Thank you. Do you have one more comment, Commissioner Cohen?
Sorry, no.
Okay. All right, Mel, do you want to roll us into our sixth item of business, the 2022 planning and meeting schedule?
Yeah, the planning and meeting schedule is included in your packet, and the only change we have to report, at least at this time, is that we won't be holding a joint meeting with the Arts Council in March. There were a couple of resignations from the Arts Council and they're regrouping a bit. So we'll reschedule that for a time when it makes a little more sense for things going on and that commission being kind of staffed up. And that's all I have for updates.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think we're gonna have updates about the library instead in that meeting in March.
I think that's true.
Yeah, Vice Chair Struck.
Yes, thank you. So Mayor, on the planning schedule, a thought just occurred to me. It might be helpful, and I think that they might do this at the city council planning schedule. I can't recall, but maybe at the bottom, there would be kind of just, topics or issues that, haven't actually been scheduled yet, but that are on the docket. So the one that comes to mind that we just talked about a few minutes ago is the bike skills final report. So I think it was Elaine said that would be coming back to the commission, probably, maybe the March meeting, maybe probably more likely the April meeting. But that might be helpful just to kind of let people know that, these are topics that are on the horizon, just haven't been scheduled for a specific meeting.
Right. Folks are wondering, when are they going to talk about whatever, if they can see it somewhere. Okay, thanks. I'll pass that along to Ryan.
That's a great idea. All right, any other comments about the meeting schedule? Okay, so our 7th item of business is commissioner reports and work plan updates. So do any commissioners have anything they want to report? I'm seeing nobody. I will report that on my walks on the south end, I have been really enjoying, there's been 3 bald eagles that are doing regular circling around as I'm walking, and I really enjoy watching that and knowing that things are going to be coming back to life here soon after this dark, dark winter. Okay, with that, I'm going to say that our next regular Parks and Recreation Commission meeting is March 3rd, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. The time now is 7:39 and the meeting is adjourned. However, as a reminder to commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening and stay safe and healthy, everyone.